Is that what you were going to say? That you didn't mean for your husband to collapse in his own fields, heart giving out at 32 years old, all because you couldn't manage a simple household without running him ragged? The accusation landed like a fist. Maeve felt the air leave her lungs. She wanted to scream that it wasn't true, that Thomas had driven himself, pushed beyond reason, refused every offer of help because his pride couldn't bear the thought of appearing weak. She wanted to tell them how she'd begged him to rest, to hire hands, to let her help with the heavier work, how he'd laughed at the very suggestion, told her that a wife's place was in the house, not the fields, and that if she'd been more useful where she belonged, he wouldn't have to work so hard. But the truth didn't matter. It never had. The town had needed someone to blame for young Thomas Harper's untimely death, and they'd found their target in his widow. Too big, they whispered. Too awkward. It was a good house, solidly built, with a large fireplace and windows that would let in plenty of light once she cleaned them. By midday, when Cole returned, the transformation was startling. He stood in the doorway, looking around with an expression Maeve couldn't quite read. "Girls are having lunch in the kitchen," she said, suddenly nervous. "I hope you don't mind. I found some beans and ham in the pantry." "Mind?" Cole took off his hat, turning it in his hands. "Mrs. Harper, I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything." She moved past him to gather the pile of dirty rags she'd accumulated. It needed doing, that's all. He caught her arm gently as she passed. "That's not all. You didn't have to do this." "Yes, I did." She met his eyes. "Mr. Harding, I need to be useful. I need to earn my place here. That's the only way this works." Something shifted in his expression. "You've got nothing to earn. You're here, you're helping with the girls. That's enough." "It's not enough for me." The words came out fiercer than she'd intended. "I've spent my whole life being told I'm not enough. Not pretty enough. Not graceful enough. Not small enough. Not anything enough. And maybe they were right. But I can work. I can clean and cook and do whatever needs doing. So please, let me do that much." Cole was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. "All right, but we need to get something clear. You work yourself to death trying to prove something. You're no use to anyone. Sarah did that. Worked herself into the ground trying to keep this place running and raise the girls and be everything to everyone. It killed her." The blunt words shocked Maeve. "I thought the girls said she died 2 years ago." "She did. Pneumonia," the doctor said. "But she was already worn down, already exhausted. Got caught in a rainstorm coming back from town, got sick, never recovered." His jaw was tight. "So yeah, work if you need to. But don't kill yourself doing it. I've had enough of watching women die." He walked away before Maeve could respond, disappearing into the kitchen where his daughter's laughter rang out. She stood in the clean room, rags still clutched in her hands, feeling the weight of his words settle over her. That afternoon, while Cole worked with the cattle and the girls napped, Maeve ventured outside to examine the garden, or what had once been a garden. Now it was mostly weeds, though she could see the ghosts of rows beneath the overgrowth. Tomato plants gone wild, bean poles falling over, a patch of something that might have been squash now choked with wild grass. She found tools in the barn, a hoe, a spade, work gloves that were far too big for her hands. The sun was hot on her back as she began to work, pulling weeds, clearing dead growth, trying to salvage what she could. It felt good to dig her hands into the earth, to do something physical and immediate. Each weed pulled was a small victory. Each section cleared was proof that she could make things better. She was so absorbed in her work that she didn't hear Cole approach until he spoke. "You're going to get sunburned." Maeve looked up, shading her eyes. Cole stood at the edge of the garden, holding something in his hands. "I found this in the barn," he said, tossing her a wide-brimmed hat. "It was Sarah's. You should wear it." Maeve caught the hat, feeling the worn straw under her fingers. It felt wrong somehow, wearing a dead woman's hat. But the sun was brutal, and practicality won out over sentiment. She put it on. "Thank you." Cole nodded, then stood there awkwardly, as if he wanted to say something else. Finally, "You didn't have to do this too." The garden needed it. Everything needs it. That's the problem. He ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "There's only so many hours in a day, and I can't—" He stopped, shook his head. Sorry, not your problem. Maybe it could be. The words were out before Maeve could stop them. My problem, I mean. Maybe I could help with more than just the house and the girls. Cole's eyebrows rose. You know anything about ranching? No, Maeve admitted, but I can learn. I'm strong. I'm not afraid of hard work, and I've got nothing but time. He studied her for a long moment, and Maeve forced herself to stand still under his scrutiny. Let him see what she was offering. Not perfection, but willingness. Not expertise, but effort. We'll start small, he finally said. Tomorrow morning you can help with the milking. We'll see how you handle that before we move on to anything else. Thank you. Don't thank me until you've met Bessie. She's got opinions about strangers. But there was almost a smile in his voice. That evening, Maeve made dinner from the supplies she'd found in the pantry. Nothing fancy, just beans and cornbread and some early greens from the garden that weren't completely overtaken by weeds. They ate together again, and this time Cole actually spoke, answering his daughter's questions about the cattle and the fence repairs. After dinner, Ivy and June begged for a story. They pulled Maeve into the main room, now clean and cozy with a fire crackling in the hearth, and climbed into her lap as if they'd been doing it all their lives. What kind of story? Maeve asked, feeling their warm weight settle against her. A happy one, June said seriously. With a princess. But not a boring princess, Ivy added, a princess who does things. Maeve laughed and began to spin a tale about a princess who disguised herself as a knight and went on adventures. The girls hung on every word, and Cole listened from his chair by the fire, pretending to mend a harness, but clearly paying attention. When the story ended, the girls were drowsy and warm. Cole scooped them up, one in each arm. Say goodnight to Mrs. Harper. Good night, they chorused. Will you tell us another story tomorrow? If you want, Maeve said softly. We want, Ivy said firmly. We want you to stay forever and ever. Cole carried them away to bed, and Maeve sat alone by the fire, feeling the day's exhaustion finally catch up with her. She should get up, should go to her little room off the kitchen, should sleep. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new work. But she stayed a moment longer, watching the flames dance, thinking about two little girls who wanted her to stay forever, and a man who'd given her a chance when no one else would. Cole returned, settling back into his chair with a tired sigh. They sat in silence for a while, the fire crackling between them. They like you, he finally said. I like them too. Maeve stared into the flames. They're wonderful, Mr. Harding. You've done a good job with them. I've done what I could. It hasn't always been enough. He paused. Sarah was the one who was good at all this. The mothering, the homemaking. You're their father. That's what matters. Cole looked at her then, really looked at her, and Maeve felt something shift in the air between them. Not romance. She wasn't naive enough to mistake this for that. But recognition, maybe. Understanding. Two people who'd both lost something and were trying to figure out how to keep going. You can stay, he said abruptly. As long as you want. I know you came here thinking you were going to be a mail-order bride, but I'm not looking for that. But if you need a place, if you need time to figure things out, you can stay. Help with the girls, help with the house. I'll pay you what I can. I don't need payment. Everyone needs something, Mrs. Harper. She thought about that, about what she needed. Safety, maybe. Purpose. A place where she wasn't constantly being measured and found wanting. A home, she said quietly. I just need a home. Cole nodded. Then you've got one, for as long as you need it. They sat together in companionable silence until the fire burned low and Maeve's eyes began to drift closed. She stood, bidding Cole good night, and made her way to her small room. As she undressed and climbed into bed, she thought about the day, about dirty dishes and a neglected garden and two little girls who'd grabbed her hands and called her perfect. About a man who'd looked at her on a platform and seen something worth saving. The next morning, Cole woke her before dawn. If you're serious about learning to work a ranch, we start now. Cows don't wait for the sun to rise. Maeve dressed quickly and followed him to the barn, where a large brown cow regarded her with suspicious eyes. This is Bessie, Cole said. Bessie, be nice. We need this one. The cow mooed, a sound that seemed deeply skeptical. Cole demonstrated the milking technique, his large hands surprisingly gentle on the cow's udder. Your turn. Maeve sat on the stool, positioned the bucket, and reached for Bessie. The cow immediately shifted, nearly knocking her over. She doesn't like me. She doesn't like anyone. Keep trying. It took 20 minutes and several near disasters, but eventually Maeve managed to coax milk from the recalcitrant cow. Her hands ached, her back hurt, but the bucket was half full, and she felt ridiculously proud. Not bad, Cole said, and the grudging approval in his voice made her feel like she'd won a prize. They worked together as dawn broke over the prairie, and Cole showed her the routine, feeding the chickens while avoiding mean Sally, who lived up to her name, checking the horses, gathering eggs. Small tasks, essential tasks, the daily rhythm that kept a ranch running. Maeve absorbed it all, asking questions, making mental notes. Her body protested the unfamiliar work, but her mind felt clearer than it had in months. This was real. This was concrete. Pull a weed, milk a cow, gather an egg. Simple cause and effect, no complicated social rules to navigate, no impossible standards to fail to meet. The girls found them at breakfast, chattering about a game they wanted to play. After they ate, Maeve spent the morning with them, while Cole rode out to check the cattle. They showed her the kittens in the barn, tiny balls of fluff that mewed and tumbled over each other. They took her to their favorite spot by the creek, where the water ran clear and wildflowers grew in riotous profusion. Mama used to bring us here, June said quietly, when we were little. You're still little, Ivy said scornfully. Not as little as we were. June picked a flower and handed it to Maeve. Do you think Mama would like you? The question caught Maeve off guard. She looked at the flower in her hand, delicate, purple, perfect. I don't know, she said honestly, but I hope so. We think she would, Ivy said with the confidence of a child who'd decided something was true and would brook no argument. We think she sent you to us. Maeve didn't know what to say to that. She wasn't sure she believed in signs or divine intervention or any of the comforting stories people told themselves about death and loss. But these girls needed to believe their mother was still looking out for them somehow, and who was she to take that away? Maybe she did, Maeve said softly. Maybe she knew you needed someone, and she made sure I was on that platform at exactly the right time. The girls beamed, and Maeve felt something crack open in her chest. She'd been so focused on surviving, on proving her worth, on not being sent away again. But these girls didn't care about any of that. They just wanted someone to love them, someone to stay. And God help her, she wanted to be that someone. The days began to blur together into a rhythm. Wake before dawn, help with morning chores, make breakfast, clean, work in the garden, tell stories, make dinner, collapse into bed. Maeve's hands developed calluses. Her skin darkened from the sun despite the hat. Her body, which had always been criticized as too large, too ungainly, proved itself strong and capable in ways she'd never imagined. Cole watched her work with an expression that slowly shifted from skeptical to surprised to something that might have been respect. He began to trust her with more, teaching her to curry the horses, showing her how to mend fence, letting her help drive the cattle from one pasture to another. You're a natural, he said one afternoon, after she'd successfully separated a calf from the herd without panicking the other animals. I'm just following your instructions. Following instructions and having a feel for it are different things. He pushed his hat back, studying her. You sure you'd never worked with animals before? Unless you count my mother's lapdog, no. Maeve couldn't keep the bitterness from her voice. Your family, they didn't have a farm? My family had a fine house in town, and a great deal of concern about maintaining their social position. She stripped off her work gloves, flexing her sore fingers. Animals were not part of that equation. Cole was quiet for a moment. That why they sent you west? Damaged the social position? Maeve hadn't talked about this with anyone, hadn't let herself think about it too deeply. But something about Cole's steady presence, his lack of judgment, made the words spill out. My husband died 3 months ago. Heart failure, the doctor said. He was only 32. She swallowed hard. The town decided it was my fault, that I'd worked him to death with my demands, my appetite, My parents agreed. They put me on that train and told me not to come back. She waited for Cole to say something dismissive, to tell her it couldn't have been that bad, to minimize her pain the way people always did. Instead, he just nodded. People need someone to blame when things go wrong, he said. Makes them feel better, I suppose. Like, if they can just point at the cause, they can avoid it themselves. He looked at her directly. Was it your fault? The question was so blunt it shocked her. No, I don't. I tried to be a good wife. I tried to make him happy, but Thomas was... She struggled for words. He was never satisfied. Nothing I did was ever enough. He worked himself into the ground because he couldn't bear to appear weak, couldn't stand to ask for help. And then he died. And everyone decided it must have been because of me. That's horseshit, Cole said flatly. Maeve blinked. What? I said it's horseshit. A man's responsible for his own choices. If your husband drove himself to death, that's on him, not you. He picked up the tools they'd been using. My Sarah, she worked herself to death too, in a way. I tried to get her to slow down, tried to hire help, but she was stubborn. Said she didn't need anyone else, that she could handle everything. I should have insisted, should have made her rest. But I didn't, and she died, and that's something I have to live with. But it's not your fault, Mrs. Harper, and it wasn't your job to save a grown man from his own pride. The words settled into Maeve like stones into deep water. She'd spent 3 months drowning in guilt, and here was this taciturn rancher telling her the simple truth she'd needed to hear. It wasn't her fault. Thank you, she whispered. Cole just nodded and walked away, leaving her standing in the pasture with tears on her cheeks and something light and fragile unfurling in her chest. Hope, maybe, or the beginning of healing. That night, after the girls were in bed, Maeve found Cole on the porch, staring out at the stars. She sat down beside him, their shoulders not quite touching. I never asked, she said. Why did you let me come here? You could have just told the girls no, could have sent me back to town. Cole was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. Then, you want the truth? Always. I was desperate. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. The girls have been asking for a mother for 2 years. Every woman in town has looked at me like I'm a charity case, brought casseroles and offered to help with the girls. But they don't see me or them. They see a widower with land and a house, and they see a chance to secure themselves a husband. And the girls, they can tell. Kids always can. He turned to look at her, his face shadowed in the darkness. But then they saw you on that platform, and something just clicked. They ran to you like they'd been looking for you their whole lives. And I thought, what the hell? Worst case, it doesn't work out, and you leave. Best case, he stopped. I don't know what the best case is yet, but you're here, and the girls are happy, and the house is clean for the first time in 2 years, so maybe the best case is just this. Right now. Maeve felt her throat tighten. I'm happy too, she admitted. Happier than I've been in maybe ever. Is that strange? No, Cole said softly. I don't think it's strange at all. They sat together in the darkness, listening to the night sounds of the prairie, and Maeve let herself imagine, just for a moment, that this could last, that she could build a life here, with these people, in this place, that she might finally have found where she belonged. It seemed too good to be true, but then again, most of her life had been too bad to be true, so maybe she was due for some balance. Good night, Mr. Harding, she said, standing. Cole, he said. You can call me Cole. Good night, Cole. She tested the name, found it fit. I'll see you in the morning. Bright and early. Bessie waits for no one. Maeve laughed and made her way inside to her small room, to her narrow bed. But as she lay in the darkness, she realized she was smiling. Actually smiling, for no reason except that tomorrow would bring more work, more challenges, more moments of this strange, unexpected family. And for the first time since her parents had handed her that train ticket, Maeve thought that maybe, just maybe, being sent away had been the best thing that ever happened to her. The weeks melted into each other like butter in a hot pan, each day bringing its own small victories and challenges. Maeve found herself settling into the rhythm of ranch life with a naturalness that surprised her. She'd wake to the sound of roosters and be out in the barn before the sun fully crested the horizon. her hands sure on Bessie's teats now, the cow having grudgingly accepted her presence. The morning milk would be strained and set aside, breakfast would appear on the table as if by magic, though the magic was simply routine and practice, and the girls would tumble into the kitchen with sleep-mussed hair and eager smiles. Cole had started lingering over his coffee in the mornings, and Maeve found she looked forward to those quiet moments before the day's work truly began. He wasn't much for conversation, but his presence had become a comfort. The way he'd nod at her over the rim of his cup, a silent acknowledgement of the hot biscuits or the perfectly fried eggs. The way he'd automatically pour her coffee before she even sat down, remembering without being asked that she took it black with just a touch of sugar. It was a Thursday morning, 3 weeks after her arrival, when everything began to shift in ways Maeve couldn't have predicted. She was in the garden, wrestling with a particularly stubborn patch of thistle, when she heard the wagon wheels. Visitors were rare this far out, and she looked up to see a buckboard approaching, driven by a woman in a prim gray dress with a face that could have been carved from granite. Cole emerged from the barn, wiping his hands on his pants, and Maeve saw his jaw tighten. The girls who'd been playing nearby suddenly went quiet. "Mrs. Killian," Cole said, his voice carefully neutral. "Wasn't expecting you." The woman climbed down from the wagon with the help of a younger man Maeve assumed was her son. She was perhaps 60, with steel gray hair pulled back so tight it seemed to stretch her skin. Her eyes swept over the ranch, cataloging everything, before landing on Maeve with the force of a physical blow. "Mr. Harding," she said, her voice sharp as a tack, "I've heard some disturbing reports from town. Something about a woman living on your property, a stranger, unchaperoned." Maeve felt her face flush hot. She stood slowly, brushing dirt from her skirt, aware of how she must look, sweaty, disheveled, her dress stained with mud and grass. "Mrs. Harper is helping with the girls in the house," Cole said evenly. "Not that it's anyone's business but mine." "But it is my business, Mr. Harding, as head of the Ladies' Auxiliary and a concerned member of this community." Mrs. Killian's gaze hadn't left Maeve. "Particularly when it comes to the moral education of young children. Ivy and June attend our Sunday school, do they not?" "They do," Cole said, his voice growing harder. "Then surely you can understand my concern. A woman of unknown character living under your roof." She let the implication hang in the air like smoke. Maeve found her voice, though it came out shakier than she'd have liked. "I assure you, Mrs. Killian, everything here is perfectly respectable. I have my own room, and I'm simply—" "I wasn't speaking to you," Mrs. Killian cut her off with the precision of a knife. "I was speaking to Mr. Harding about the welfare of his daughters." Ivy stepped forward, her small face fierce. "Mrs. Harper is nice. She tells us stories and braids our hair and makes good food." "That's enough, Ivy," Cole said quietly, but there was pride in his voice. "No, it's not enough." June joined her sister, the two of them standing shoulder to shoulder like tiny soldiers. "We like her. We want her to stay." Mrs. Killian's expression suggested she'd just tasted something sour. Children don't always know what's best for them. That's why they need proper guidance from respectable adults. She turned back to Cole. "I came out here to offer a solution. My niece, Rebecca, is a godly young woman of excellent character. She's recently returned from finishing school back east and would be more than happy to serve as governess to your daughters. She could move into your spare room and provide the girls with proper female instruction while maintaining all standards of propriety." The words landed like stones in still water. Maeve felt something cold settle in her stomach. Of course, she should have seen this coming. She was too good to be true, this life she'd started building. Too comfortable, too easy. There was always someone ready to tear it down. Cole's expression had gone completely blank, which Maeve had learned meant he was furious. "I appreciate the offer, Mrs. Killian, but I'm satisfied with the current arrangement." "Are you?" The older woman's voice dripped skepticism. "Or are you simply taking advantage of a desperate woman's willingness to perform unpaid labor? Because that, Mr. Harding, would be exploitation of the worst sort." "I pay Mrs. Harper," Cole started, but Maeve saw the trap. If he admitted to paying her she was an employee living unchaperoned in his house. If he claimed she was a guest, then Mrs. Killian's implications of impropriety would stand. "I'm his mail-order bride," Maeve heard herself say. The lie came out smooth as silk, surprising even her. We're engaged to be married. I came west specifically to marry Mr. Harding, and we're simply waiting for the appropriate mourning period to conclude before making it official." The silence that followed was deafening. Cole stared at her, eyes wide. The girls' mouths fell open in identical expressions of shock. Mrs. Killian's face went through several interesting color changes. "Is that so?" she finally managed. "It is," Maeve said, lifting her chin. "And I find it rather insulting, Mrs. Killian, that you'd question Mr. Harding's honor or mine. We've been perfectly proper. I have my own quarters, and we're waiting the respectable amount of time before proceeding with wedding plans. Surely you can't find fault with that." Mrs. Killian's mouth worked like a fish out of water. Well, if that's the case, then I suppose—" She drew herself up. "Though I must say, Mr. Harding, it would have been appropriate to inform the community of your intentions. We would have welcomed your intended properly." "Didn't realize I needed permission," Cole said, his voice dry as dust. "Not permission, certainly, but common courtesy." Mrs. Killian was already retreating toward her wagon. "Well, I suppose congratulations are in order. Come along, William. We've taken up enough of Mr. Harding's time." They watched the wagon disappear down the long drive in a cloud of dust. The moment it was out of sight, Cole turned to Maeve with an expression she couldn't quite read. "What?" he said slowly. "Was that?" "I'm sorry." The words tumbled out in a rush. "I panicked. She was going to— I could see what she was thinking, and I'm sorry. I shouldn't have lied. I'll go pack my things. I'll find somewhere else to— Stop." Cole held up a hand. "Just stop. Give me a minute to think." The girls had no such restraint. They launched themselves at Maeve with shrieks of joy. "You're going to marry Daddy!" Ivy was practically vibrating with excitement. "We're going to be a real family," June added. "Girls, that's not—" Maeve tried, but Cole interrupted her. "Inside, both of you. Go play with the kittens or something. Mrs. Harper and I need to talk." They went reluctantly, looking back over their shoulders with expressions of poorly concealed glee. Cole waited until they were out of earshot, then turned to Maeve. "That was quick thinking," he said finally. "That was stupid," Maeve corrected. "Now the whole town is going to think we're engaged, and when we're not actually married. It's going to look even worse than before. I've made everything more complicated. I'm sorry. I'll leave. I'll tell people it was a misunderstanding, that I was confused about the arrangements. You can hire Mrs. Killian's perfect niece, and— Do you want to leave?" The question stopped her cold. "What?" "It's a simple question, Mrs. Harper. Do you want to leave this ranch?" Maeve looked around at the land stretching endlessly in all directions. The house where she'd spent 3 weeks cleaning and cooking and making a home, the barn where temperamental Bessie waited for her morning milking, the garden she'd coaxed back to life. She thought about Ivy and June's laughter, about the way they'd grabbed her hands that first day, as if they'd been waiting for her all along, about Cole's quiet presence at the breakfast table, his gruff approval when she'd successfully mended a fence, the way he'd started to smile more often. "No," she whispered. "I don't want to leave." "Then don't." Cole pushed his hat back, studying her. "Here's the situation as I see it. You just told the biggest gossip in 3 counties that we're engaged. By supper time, everyone within 20 miles will know. We can either let you be branded a liar and throw you out, which makes both of us look bad and breaks my daughter's hearts. Or what?" Maeve's heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. "Or we make it true." He said it like he was discussing whether to plant corn or wheat. "We get engaged, for real. Wait a respectable amount of time, then get married. You get to stay, the girls get what they've been begging for, and Mrs. Killian and her ilk can't say a damn thing about it." Maeve stared at him. "You can't be serious." "Do I look like I'm joking?" Cole's expression was perfectly earnest. "Look, I'm not talking about a love match or anything like that. I'm talking about a practical arrangement between 2 adults who get along well enough and both need something the other can provide. You need a home and a place where you're not judged for every little thing. I need help with the ranch and the girls, and apparently I need a wife to keep the town gossips from destroying my daughter's reputations. That's—" Maeve struggled for words. "That's insane." "Maybe," Cole shrugged. But it makes sense too. We work well together. The girls love you. You're good with the ranch work. Better than I expected. And He stopped, seemed to search for words. I trust you. That's not something I say lightly. The words hit Maeve harder than she expected. Trust. When had anyone ever said they trusted her? Thomas certainly hadn't. Her parents had only ever seen her as a disappointment. But this man, this quiet rancher who barely knew her, said he trusted her. I need time, she managed, to think about this. Take all the time you need, Cole said. But fair warning, once that story gets around town, you're going to start getting visitors. Women wanting to plan a wedding, men wanting to congratulate me, the whole 9 yards. Might be easier to just commit to the story now rather than trying to backtrack later. He was right, and Maeve knew it. But the idea of marrying again, of putting herself back in that position of vulnerability, it terrified her. What if I'm a terrible wife? The question came out small. What if you realize I'm everything they said I was, cursed and burdensome and... Stop. Cole's voice was sharp. I've seen you work for 3 weeks straight. I've watched you gentle my daughters and tame my cow and bring my house back to life. If that's what cursed looks like, then curse me too. And as for burdensome, he almost smiled. Mrs. Harper, you've lightened my burden more than you know. Tears pricked at Maeve's eyes. She blinked them back furiously, but one escaped anyway, tracking down her cheek. Cole reached out, his thumb brushing it away with surprising gentleness. Think about it, he said softly. But know this. If you say yes, I'll do right by you. I'll treat you with respect, give you freedom to run the house as you see fit, and I'll never raise my hand to you or diminish you the way I suspect you've been diminished before. That's my promise. Then he walked away, leaving Maeve standing in the garden with her mind spinning and her heart doing complicated things in her chest. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Maeve went through the motions, cooking dinner, helping the girls with their chores, mending a torn shirt, but her mind was elsewhere. The girls chattered endlessly about weddings and what color dress Maeve should wear and whether they could have cake. They seemed to have no doubt about the outcome, which was either touching or terrifying. Maeve couldn't decide which. That evening, after the girls were in bed, she found Cole in the barn checking on a mare that was due to foal soon. He looked up when she entered, but didn't speak, just waited. I have conditions, Maeve said. Something flickered across Cole's face. Relief, maybe. All right. If we do this, it has to be real, not just for show. I won't live a lie in front of your daughters. She took a breath. I need to know that this is permanent, that you won't decide in 6 months or a year that you made a mistake and send me away. I can't... Her voice cracked. I can't do that again, be thrown away again. You won't be. Cole moved closer. Maeve, I don't make promises I can't keep. If we do this, it's for life, for better or worse, like the vows say. She nodded, trying to steady herself. And you have to let me help, really help, not just with the house, but with the ranch. I need to feel useful, to know I'm contributing. Done. You're already doing that. He paused. Anything else? Maeve thought about her marriage to Thomas, about all the small ways he'd made her feel less than. I need you to talk to me. If something's bothering you, if I do something wrong, tell me directly. Don't let it fester. Don't punish me with silence or coldness. I'd rather argue than be frozen out. I can do that. Cole tilted his head. My turn for conditions? Maeve nodded, bracing herself. Don't work yourself to death trying to prove something. Sarah did that and it killed her. I won't watch another woman He stopped, corrected himself. Another woman under my protection do the same. You rest when you need to rest. You ask for help when you need help. Understood? Understood. And the girls? They're going to expect you to be their mother, not Sarah, but a mother. If you can't handle that, if it's too much, tell me now. I can handle it, Maeve said softly. I want to handle it. Cole, they're wonderful. Being with them is the easiest part of all of this. He smiled then, a real smile that transformed his whole face. All right then. So we're doing this? Maeve took a deep breath, thinking about train platforms and cruelty and a life she'd left behind. Thinking about 2 little girls in blue dresses and a man who'd looked at her and seen strength instead of failure. Thinking about a house that was starting to feel like home and land that stretched endless and free under a sky so big it made her dizzy. "Yes," she said. "We're doing this." Cole held out his hand. Maeve took it, feeling the calluses rough against her palm, and they shook on it like business partners sealing a deal, which, in a way, they were. A practical arrangement between two practical people who needed each other. If her heart beat a little faster when his hand held hers, if something warm unfurled in her chest at his smile, well, that was nobody's business but her own. The next Sunday, Cole loaded them all into the wagon and drove them to church for the first time since Maeve had arrived. She'd pressed her best dress, still black mourning, but clean and carefully mended, and helped the girls into matching calico dresses with blue ribbons. They looked like a family, she realized. A real family. The church was a simple wooden building on the edge of Red Bluff Station, and it seemed like half the county was there. Heads turned as they entered, whispers rising like dust. Maeve kept her chin up, her hand resting lightly on June's shoulder while Ivy held tight to her father's hand. They found a pew near the back. Almost immediately, women began to drift over, their faces bright with curiosity, thinly veiled as concern. "Mr. Harding, is it true what we've heard?" A plump woman in an elaborate hat leaned across the aisle. "About you and this young lady?" "If you heard we're engaged, then yes, it's true." Cole's voice carried, and more heads turned. "Mrs. Harper came west to be my wife. We're planning a wedding once the proper mourning period has concluded." "How wonderful!" the woman gushed, though her eyes were calculating as they swept over Maeve. "We had no idea you were courting again." "We corresponded," Maeve said, the lie coming easier now, "for several months before I came west. Mr. Harding spoke so lovingly of his daughters in his letters that I felt I knew them before I ever arrived." "How romantic," another woman simpered, "and so brave of you, coming all this way." The service began, saving Maeve from having to continue the fiction. She tried to focus on the sermon, something about forgiveness and new beginnings, but she was hyper-aware of the stares, the whispers behind hands, the way people kept glancing at her and Cole and the girls. Halfway through the service, the Reverend paused in his sermon. He was an older man with a shock of white hair and eyes that seemed to miss nothing. "I understand we have some news to celebrate," he said, his gaze finding them in the back pew. "Mr. Harding, would you and your intended care to come forward so we might offer our blessing?" Maeve's stomach dropped. Beside her, Cole stiffened, but there was no way to refuse without making a scene, so they stood and made their way to the front of the church, the girls trailing behind them. The Reverend smiled, but there was something sharp in it. Forgive me, Mrs. Harper, is it?" "Yes, Reverend." "Welcome to Red Bluff Station. I understand you arrived on the bride train some weeks ago?" "Yes, sir." "And you've been residing at the Harding Ranch since then?" Maeve felt the trap closing. "I have. In my own quarters, with complete propriety." Of course, of course." The Reverend's smile didn't waver. "And Mr. Harding, you've been a widower for how long now?" 2 years this past March," Cole said, his voice tight. 2 years. And in all that time, you've shown no interest in remarrying, no courtship, no correspondence with potential brides, nothing. And yet suddenly, here is Mrs. Harper, moved into your home, taking care of your daughters, and we're told you're engaged?" He let the questions hang in the air. "Forgive me if I find the timing rather convenient." The church was dead silent. Maeve could feel every eye on them, waiting to see what they'd say, how they'd defend themselves. "What exactly are you implying, Reverend?" Cole's voice had gone dangerously quiet. "I'm implying nothing, Mr. Harding. I'm simply concerned for your daughter's welfare and the moral standards of this community. Having an unmarried woman living in your home, regardless of the living arrangements, sets a poor example. If you're truly engaged, then I suggest you proceed with the marriage immediately rather than waiting for some arbitrary mourning period to elapse. Otherwise," he let the word hang, "otherwise, people might think this is simply an arrangement of convenience, which would be a sin in the eyes of God." Rage bubbled up in Maeve's chest, hot and fierce. Before Cole could respond, before she could think better of it, she stepped forward. "You want to talk about sin, Reverend? Then let's talk about the sin of judgment, the sin of cruelty masquerading as concern." Her voice shook, but it carried. I came west because I had nowhere else to go, because my own family threw me out, blamed me for my husband's death, told me I was cursed. I stood on that platform while everyone else was chosen, and I was mocked. I was called too wide to wed by men who wouldn't know decency if it bit them. She felt Cole's hand on her arm, but she shook him off, too angry now to stop. And then these two little girls. She pulled Ivy and June close. These two beautiful, sweet girls grabbed my hands and told their father they wanted me. Not because I was pretty or refined or any of the things society says a woman should be. Because I was there, and I was kind, and I needed them as much as they needed me. And their father, this man you're questioning, he gave me a chance when no one else would. He treated me with more respect in 3 weeks than my own parents showed me in 23 years. Tears were streaming down her face now, but she didn't care. So, yes, we're engaged, and yes, I'm living on his ranch. And if that offends your sense of propriety, Reverend, then perhaps you should examine your own heart and ask yourself why you're so quick to condemn people who are simply trying to survive and find some small measure of happiness in this difficult world. The silence that followed was absolute. Maeve stood there, chest heaving, suddenly aware of what she'd done. She'd just shouted at a reverend in front of the entire congregation. She'd exposed herself, her pain, her shameful history. She'd probably just destroyed any chance of acceptance in this community. Then Cole stepped forward, his arm sliding around her waist in a gesture that was both protective and claiming. "Mrs. Harper saved my daughter's lives," he said, his voice ringing clear through the church. "3 nights ago, during that storm, the girls went out to the barn against my orders. They got spooked by lightning and ran into the herd. A cow charged them. Mrs. Harper threw herself between my children and 1,000 pounds of panicked animal. She took the fall. She kept them safe." Wait, what? Maeve's mind spun. That hadn't happened. That was... Then she understood. Cole was giving them their story, their reason, making the lie they'd told into something the town could accept, could celebrate. He continued, his voice softening. "I've watched her work harder than any woman I've ever known. I've seen her gentle my daughters and bring joy back into a house that had forgotten what joy looked like. And if you want to stand there and question her character or my judgment, then you're welcome to do so. But you'll do it without my daughters in the audience." He turned to leave, pulling Maeve with him. Ivy and June followed, their small hands finding Maeve's free hand. They were almost to the door when a voice called out, "Wait!" It was Mrs. Killian, of all people, standing in her pew. Her face was flushed, her hands clenched at her sides. "I owe you an apology, Mrs. Harper," she said stiffly. "I came to your home with assumptions and judgment, and I was wrong. If Mr. Harding says you saved his daughters, then you're a hero, not a—" She stopped, swallowed. "Not what I implied. I'm sorry." Other voices joined hers, a chorus of agreement. The plump woman in the elaborate hat was nodding vigorously. A younger woman Maeve hadn't met stood and started to clap. Others joined in, the applause building. The Reverend's face had gone red. He raised his hands for silence. "It seems," he said tightly, "that I too may have been hasty in my judgment. Mrs. Harper, Mr. Harding, please accept my apologies and my blessing on your upcoming marriage." Cole just nodded once, his arm still firm around Maeve's waist, and guided them out of the church and into the bright sunlight. They climbed into the wagon in silence. Cole clicked to the horses, and they started moving. They were almost out of town before anyone spoke. "That storm," Maeve said quietly, so the girls couldn't hear from the back. "That didn't happen." "It will," Cole said grimly. "Storm's coming tonight, I can feel it, and those girls are going to do something foolish, because they always do when there's lightning, and you're going to save them, because that's who you are." He looked at her then, and Maeve saw something fierce in his eyes. "And tomorrow, the whole town is going to know that I'm marrying you because you're brave and strong and good, not because of some convenient arrangement, but because you're the kind of woman who'd throw herself in front of danger to save my children. Understood?" Maeve's throat was too tight to speak. She just nodded. That night, the storm came. It rolled in from the west like God's own fury, turning the afternoon sky the color of old bruises. Maeve had been watching the horizon since they'd returned from church, seeing the clouds build and tower, feeling the pressure change in the air. She'd grown up with polite thunderstorms that rumbled apologetically in the distance. This was something else entirely, something vast and violent and utterly indifferent to human concerns. Cole was in the barn, securing everything that could blow away or spook the animals. Maeve had the girls in the kitchen, teaching them to make biscuits, when the first crack of thunder shook the house hard enough to rattle the dishes. "Whoa," Ivy breathed, eyes wide. "That was close," June said, pressing against Maeve's side. "It's all right." Maeve kept her voice steady, even as her own heart kicked up. "Your father knows what he's doing. The animals will be fine." But she moved to the window anyway, peering out through the gathering darkness. She could just make out Cole's form moving between the barn and the paddock, driving the horses into shelter. The wind was picking up, whipping his shirt against his body, sending dust devils spinning across the yard. Lightning split the sky, and the thunder followed so quickly there was no gap at all. The storm was directly overhead now. Rain began to fall, not gradually but all at once, like someone had overturned a bucket the size of the sky. "Girls, stay inside," Maeve said firmly. "Stay right here in the kitchen, away from the windows. I'm going to help your father." "But he said," Ivy started. "I know what he said, but that's too much work for one person." Maeve grabbed the old oilcloth coat hanging by the door. "I'll be back soon. Do not leave this house. Promise me." "We promise," they chorused, but something in their voices made Maeve uneasy. She paused, looking at them seriously. "I mean it. No matter what you hear, no matter what happens, you stay inside. Your father would never forgive me if something happened to you because I left you alone." She didn't wait for another response, just pulled open the door and stepped out into the maelstrom. The rain hit her like a physical force, cold and hard. Within seconds, she was soaked through, the coat useless against this kind of downpour. She could barely see 10 feet ahead, the world reduced to gray sheets of water and the occasional lightning flash that turned everything stark white. "Cole!" she shouted, but the wind tore the words away. She made it to the barn by memory more than sight. Inside, it was marginally better, dry at least, though the wind howled through gaps in the walls and the animals were restless. Cole was trying to calm one of the horses, a big bay that was dancing nervously in its stall. He looked up when she entered, and even in the dim light she could see his expression shift from surprise to anger. "I told you to stay inside," he said, "and I ignored you. What needs doing?" For a moment she thought he might argue. Then another crash of thunder made the horse rear, and Cole's attention snapped back to the animal. "Check the cattle. They're in the near pasture, but if they spook and run, they'll tear through the fence and scatter to hell and back. Just look, don't try to move them. Come right back and tell me if they're settled or not." Maeve nodded and turned back into the storm. The near pasture was only a few hundred yards from the barn, but it felt like miles. The wind pushed against her, trying to knock her down, and the rain was so heavy she had to walk with her head down, watching her feet to keep from stumbling. Lightning cracked again, closer, and she saw the cattle bunched together near the far fence, dark shapes in the darkness, heads down against the storm. They seemed calm enough, all things considered. She was about to turn back when she saw movement near the barn. Small movement, too small to be cattle or horses. Her heart stopped. Two small figures in nightgowns, soaked through, stumbling through the mud toward the barn. Ivy and June, their promise forgotten in the face of fear or curiosity or whatever had driven them out into this nightmare. "No," Maeve breathed, and then she was running, sliding in the mud, rain blinding her. "Girls, go back!" They didn't hear her. They were heading for the barn, probably looking for their father, and they were moving straight toward the cattle herd. The animals were still bunched up, still relatively calm, but another lightning strike could change that in an instant. Maeve ran faster, her lungs burning. She was maybe 50 yards away when the lightning came. A bolt that hit so close she felt the electricity in the air, felt her hair stand on end. The thunder was instantaneous, deafening, and the cattle lost their minds. They scattered, bellowing in terror, a living tide of panic and power. And right in their path, frozen in fear, were Ivy and June. Maeve didn't think. There was no time for thought, no time for planning or strategy or anything but pure instinct. She threw herself forward, arms outstretched, reaching for the girls even as a massive cow, Bessie, she registered with the absurd clarity that comes in moments of crisis, charged toward them, head lowered, hooves throwing up fountains of mud. Her hands closed on fabric, June's nightgown, Ivy's arm, and she yanked them both toward her, throwing her body between them and the charging animal. The world became a confusion of movement and noise. She felt the cow veer at the last second, its shoulder slamming into her side with enough force to drive the air from her lungs. She felt herself falling, pulling the girls down with her into the mud, covering them with her body as hooves thundered past, as the rest of the herd streamed around them like water around a rock. She felt pain, sharp and bright, in her ribs where the cow had hit her. Felt more pain as something, a hoof, maybe, caught her shoulder. But mostly she felt the girls beneath her, warm and alive, their hearts beating against her chest like trapped birds. Then it was over. The cattle were past, still running but away from them now. The rain kept falling. Maeve tried to breathe and couldn't quite manage it, her ribs screaming in protest. "Maeve?" Ivy's voice was tiny and terrified. "Are you hurt?" Before she could answer, strong hands were pulling her up, turning her. Cole's face appeared in front of hers, white with fear and fury. "Are you insane?" He was shouting, or maybe speaking normally, and she just couldn't hear properly. "You could have been killed. All three of you could have—" He stopped, his hands moving over her, checking for injuries. She tried to tell him she was fine, but when she tried to speak, she started coughing instead, and that made her ribs hurt worse. "Inside," Cole said grimly. He scooped up both girls with one arm, how was that even possible, and put the other arm around Maeve's waist, supporting most of her weight. "Now!" The trip back to the house was a blur. Maeve was shaking violently, whether from cold or shock or pain she couldn't tell. Cole got them through the door and immediately started barking orders. "Ivy, June, out of those wet clothes, into your room, into dry nightgowns, under the blankets, move." They scurried off without argument, their faces pale. Cole turned to Maeve, his expression grim. "Sit," he said, guiding her to a chair by the stove. "Don't move." He disappeared and returned with blankets, towels, and what looked like a medicine kit. His hands were surprisingly gentle as he helped her out of the soaked coat and began checking her over more carefully. "Ribs hurt?" he asked. "Yes," she managed. "Breathe deep." She tried and winced. Cole's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "Don't think they're broken, but you're going to be bruised to hell. Shoulder? Hurts, but I can move it." He checked anyway, his fingers probing carefully. Maeve bit her lip against the pain, determined not to cry out. When he was satisfied nothing was broken, he wrapped one of the blankets around her shoulders and then just stood there, looking at her with an expression she couldn't read. "You could have died," he said finally, his voice rough. "So could they. They shouldn't have been out there in the first place. I told them—" He stopped, ran a hand through his wet hair. "Christ, Maeve. When I saw you go down, when I saw that cow coming at you—" His voice broke. Maeve looked up at him, really looked, and saw that his hands were shaking. Cole Harding, who faced down storms and cattle and the daily grind of ranch life without flinching, was shaking. "I'm all right," she said softly. "We're all right. This time." He knelt in front of her chair, his eyes level with hers. "But what about next time? What about the next fool thing my daughters do, the next crisis, the next—" "Then I'll be there for that too," Maeve interrupted. "That's what family does, isn't it? They show up, they help, they throw themselves in front of cows if that's what's needed." Cole made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "You're crazy, you know that?" "Probably." Maeve reached out with her good arm and touched his face, her hand coming away wet. She couldn't tell if it was rain or tears. "But I'm your crazy now. We made a deal, remember?" He caught her hand, holding it against his cheek. "Maeve Harper, you are the most stubborn, most infuriating, most—" He stopped, his eyes searching hers. "Most incredible woman I've ever met." Before she could respond, small feet came pattering down the hall. Ivy and June appeared in the doorway, dressed in dry nightgowns, their faces streaked with tears. "We're sorry," Ivy said, her voice breaking. "We didn't mean to. We just wanted to see if Daddy was okay. And then the thunder was so loud and we got scared." "Come here," Maeve said, opening her arms despite the protest from her ribs. The girls rushed to her, careful but desperate, and she held them as best she could. Cole stood, giving them space, but his hand rested on June's head in a gesture of comfort. "You could have been hurt," Maeve said quietly. "Both of you. When I saw you out there, when I saw that cow charging, her voice caught. Promise me you'll never do something like that again. Promise me. We promise, they said in unison, and this time Maeve believed them. Sometimes you had to learn through terror. Good. She kissed each of their heads. Now, who wants hot chocolate? In the middle of a storm? Ivy asked, momentarily distracted from her guilt. Especially in the middle of a storm. That's when you need it most. Cole moved to the stove, and Maeve realized with a start that he was making the hot chocolate himself, measuring out milk and cocoa and sugar with careful precision. The girls climbed into chairs at the table, and Maeve joined them, moving stiffly but managing. They drank their chocolate while the storm raged outside, the wind howling and the rain drumming against the roof. But inside it was warm and dry, and the four of them were together, and somehow that made the storm seem less frightening. Tell us a story, June said eventually, a happy one. So Maeve told them about a princess who was afraid of storms until she learned that they were just the sky having big feelings, and that sometimes big feelings were scary, but they always passed. The girls listened, drowsy now, their earlier terror fading into sleepy contentment. When the story ended, Cole carried them to bed. Maeve heard him talking to them softly in their room, heard their murmured responses, heard the sound of a lullaby being hummed, badly, but with feeling. He returned to find her still at the table, staring into her empty cup. You should rest, he said. Those ribs need time to heal. I'm fine. You're not fine. You took a hit from a cow and got trampled by a herd. You're going to be in pain for days. Worth it, Maeve said simply. Cole sat down across from her, his expression serious. You meant what you said? About being my crazy now? I did. Maeve met his eyes. Cole, I know this started as a practical arrangement. I know this isn't a love match or whatever people want to call it, but those girls in there, I'd die for them. I realized that tonight. When I saw them in danger, I didn't think about the consequences, or whether it was smart or rational. I just knew I had to keep them safe. That's what love is, Cole said quietly. Not the romantic kind, maybe, but love nonetheless. The kind that makes you stupid brave. The kind that makes you throw yourself in front of cows. Maeve felt tears prick at her eyes. I never thought I'd have this. A family that actually wanted me. A place where I mattered. You matter. Cole reached across the table and took her hand. You matter to them. You matter to... He stopped, seemed to struggle with something. You matter to me too, more than I expected, more than I probably should admit. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Maeve felt her heart do something complicated in her chest. Cole, I know. He squeezed her hand gently. I know this is supposed to be practical. I know we're not supposed to complicate things, but I need you to know, when I saw you go down tonight, when I thought you might be hurt or worse, his voice roughened. It scared me. More than Sarah's death scared me, if I'm being honest. Because Sarah's death was something that happened to me. But losing you would be... He didn't finish, but he didn't need to. Maeve understood. I'm not going anywhere, she said firmly. You're stuck with me, Cole Harding, for better or worse, remember? For better or worse, he echoed. Then, surprising them both, he lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently. Thank you. For saving my daughters. For saving me, really. I didn't know how much we needed you until you were here. Maeve's throat was too tight to speak. She just nodded, blinking back tears, and they sat together in the quiet kitchen while the storm slowly spent itself outside. The next few days were a special kind of torture. Maeve's ribs made every movement an exercise in pain management, but she refused to stay in bed. There was too much to do, too much damage from the storm to repair. The fence needed mending where the cattle had broken through. The garden was a muddy mess. Half the shingles on the barn roof had blown off. Cole tried to make her rest, actually going so far as to order her to stay in the house. Maeve ignored him and went out anyway, moving slowly but stubbornly working alongside him. They argued about it, their first real fight, with Maeve insisting she was fine and Cole saying she was being an idiot, and finally they reached a compromise. She could help with tasks that didn't require lifting or stretching, and she'd rest for an hour after lunch. The girls were subdued for several days, staying close to Maeve, as if afraid she might disappear if they let her out of their sight. They helped with small tasks around the house and followed every instruction without their usual arguing. The guilt was eating at them, Maeve realized, and finally she sat them down for a talk. "What happened wasn't your fault," she said firmly. "You made a mistake, yes, but you're 6 years old. 6-year-olds make mistakes. That's how you learn." "But you got hurt," June said, tears welling up, "because of us." "I got hurt because I chose to protect you. That's different. I don't regret it, not for a second." She pulled them close, ignoring the protest from her ribs. "You two are worth a few bruises and a sore shoulder. You're worth everything." "Even better than hot chocolate?" Ivy asked, and Maeve heard the tentative humor in her voice, saw her trying to be brave. "Even better than hot chocolate," Maeve confirmed, "although that's a close competition." They giggled, and the tension finally broke. Over the next few days, they slowly returned to their normal selves, chattering and laughing and getting into minor mischief that Maeve was more than happy to handle. Word of what had happened spread through town faster than wildfire. Mrs. Killian arrived 3 days after the storm with a basket of food and a stiff but sincere apology for doubting Maeve's character. Other women followed, bringing casseroles and offers of help, wanting to hear the story firsthand, treating Maeve like some kind of hero. "You threw yourself in front of a stampeding herd," one woman said, eyes wide. "That's the bravest thing I've ever heard." "It wasn't brave," Maeve protested. "It was just, they needed help." "That's what makes it brave," the woman replied. The attention was uncomfortable, but Maeve endured it for Cole and the girls' sake. If it meant they'd be accepted in the community, if it meant no one would question their family again, then she'd smile and nod and accept their casseroles. A week after the storm, Cole found her in the garden, carefully working around the plants that had survived the deluge. Her movements were still stiff, her ribs still sore, but she was healing. "Got something for you," he said. Maeve looked up to find him holding out a small box. She wiped her hands on her apron and took it, curious. Inside, nestled in cotton, was a ring. Simple gold with a small stone that caught the light. "It was my mother's," Cole said quietly. "Thought you should have it. If you're going to be my wife, you should have a ring." Maeve stared at it, her vision blurring. "Cole, I can't. This is a family heirloom. And your family." He took the ring from the box and held out his hand. "May I?" Wordlessly, Maeve extended her left hand. The ring slid onto her finger like it had been made for her, and maybe it had. Maybe everything that had happened, the train, the platform, the storm, had been leading to this moment. "Thank you," she whispered. Cole smiled, and it transformed his whole face. "Should probably make this official. Maeve Harper, will you marry me? For real this time, not just for show?" Maeve looked at him, this man who'd given her a chance when no one else would, who'd trusted her with his daughters, who'd looked at her with respect instead of disgust. She thought about the house she'd made home, the garden she'd brought back to life, the 2 little girls who'd grabbed her hands and refused to let go. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I'll marry you." He kissed her then, gentle and careful of her healing ribs, and Maeve felt something slot into place in her chest. This was right. This was where she was supposed to be. When they broke apart, they found Ivy and June watching from the kitchen window, their faces pressed against the glass, grinning like conspirators. "They've probably been spying this whole time," Cole said, shaking his head. "Good," Maeve said. "Let them see. Let them know that this is real, that we're a family, that no one's going anywhere." That night, after the girls were in bed, Maeve and Cole sat on the porch watching the stars. The air was cool and clean after the storm, and the sky was so clear it seemed like you could see forever. "I need to tell you something," Cole said suddenly. "About Sarah." Maeve waited, not pushing, letting him find the words. "I loved her," he said finally. "I did, but it wasn't, we weren't," he struggled. "We married because it was expected. 2 families, both with land, seemed like a good match, and it was fine, mostly. We got along. We had the girls, but we never—" He stopped, tried again. "We never talked. Not really. Not about the important things. We just existed side by side, doing the work, raising the children, but we were more partners than anything else. Cole, you don't have to, but I do, because I don't want that with you. He turned to look at her. I want more than fine, more than just existing side by side. I want, he seemed to search for words. I want what we've already started building, the talking, the arguing, the working together. I want to keep building that. Does that make sense? Perfect sense, Maeve said softly. They sat in comfortable silence for a while longer. Then Maeve said, I need to tell you something too. About Thomas. Cole waited. I didn't love him, Maeve said, the admission feeling like a betrayal even though Thomas was 2 years dead. I tried. I wanted to. But he made it very clear that I was a disappointment, that I wasn't what he'd hoped for. And I spent 6 months trying to be smaller, quieter, less, trying to be the wife he wanted instead of the person I was. And it still wasn't enough. He was a fool, Cole said bluntly. Maybe, but he was also just human. He had expectations, and I didn't meet them, and neither of us knew how to bridge that gap. She looked down at the ring on her finger. I don't want that either. I don't want to spend our marriage trying to be someone I'm not. Then don't. Cole took her hand. Be exactly who you are. Stubborn, brave, hardworking, kind. That's who I want. That's who the girls need. Just be you, Maeve. That's all I'm asking. I can do that, she said, and meant it. Later, lying in her narrow bed, Maeve touched the ring on her finger and thought about the future. In 3 weeks, they'd be married. A simple ceremony at the church. Just family and a few friends. The girls were already planning what they'd wear, what flowers they'd pick, what songs they'd sing. It wouldn't be like her first wedding, with all the empty pomp and circumstance, the expensive dress, an elaborate celebration that had meant nothing. This would be real, simple, true. She thought about Cole's words, about wanting more than fine, about building something together. She thought about Ivy and June, about how completely and terrifyingly she'd come to love them. She thought about the ranch, the work, the endless sky. And for the first time in her life, Maeve Harper allowed herself to believe that she might actually be happy. Not someday, not eventually, but right now, right here. She'd come west as a last resort, expecting nothing, hoping for nothing. Instead, she'd found everything she'd never known she needed. The woman who'd been too wide to wed had found a family who thought she was exactly right. Outside, the prairie stretched endless under the stars, and somewhere in the darkness, a cow lowed softly. Maeve smiled and let herself drift toward sleep, her hand resting on her healing ribs, her future settling around her shoulders like a warm blanket. Tomorrow would bring more work, more challenges, more moments of joy and frustration, and the beautiful ordinariness of family life. But that was fine, better than fine. That was everything. The morning of what should have been 3 weeks of quiet preparation dawned with unexpected complications. Maeve was in the kitchen making breakfast when she heard the wagon wheels. Too many wagon wheels for a casual visit. She looked out the window to see not one, but 4 wagons pulling up to the house, filled with women from town and enough fabric, ribbon, and mysterious boxes to stock a general store. Oh no, she breathed. Cole appeared at her elbow, coffee cup in hand, and surveyed the approaching invasion. I'll be in the North Pasture, far North Pasture, possibly Montana. Coward, Maeve accused, but she was smiling despite her nervousness. Survival instinct, he corrected. He kissed her forehead, a gesture that had become natural over the past week, and headed for the door. Girls, your mama needs you. The casual use of the word made Maeve's heart skip. The girls had started calling her mama 3 days ago, tentatively at first, then with increasing confidence when she didn't correct them. Cole had started referring to her that way too, not in front of her, but she'd overheard him talking to the girls, and each time it sent a warm flood through her chest. Ivy and June came running just as the first wave of women reached the porch. Mrs. Killian led the charge, her face set in an expression of determined benevolence. Mrs. Harper, we've come to help you prepare for your wedding, she announced. No bride should face her wedding day without proper support from the community. That's very kind, but I don't want to impose Nonsense. It's already decided. Mrs. Killian swept past her into the house, the other women following like ducklings. We have dress fabric, we have recipes for the wedding breakfast, and Martha here, she gestured to a round-faced woman struggling with an enormous box, has brought her mother's veil, which you simply must wear. Maeve found herself swept up in a whirlwind of activity. Fabric was unfurled across every surface. Patterns were debated, measurements were taken with ruthless efficiency. The girls watched with wide eyes from the corner, occasionally offering opinions that were both enthusiastic and completely impractical. "It should be blue," Ivy declared. "Blue like the sky." "Blue is for every day," Mrs. Killian said firmly. "A wedding dress should be special. I'm thinking cream silk with lace at the collar and cuffs." "I don't need silk," Maeve protested. "Something simple would be—" "Every bride needs silk." This from Martha, who was examining Maeve's measurements with a critical eye. "You're tall, which is good. We can do a fitted bodice and a full skirt without overwhelming your frame. And with your coloring, cream will be lovely." Maeve felt tears prick at her eyes. These women who'd stared at her on that platform, who'd whispered about her being too wide to wed, were now fussing over her like she was precious, like she mattered. "Thank you," she managed. "All of you. I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything," Mrs. Killian said, but her voice was gentler than Maeve had ever heard it. "Just let us do this. Consider it our apology for not seeing you clearly from the start." The next several hours were a blur of pinning and stitching and debating. Maeve was made to stand still while women circled her, arguing about hem lengths and whether the sleeves should be short or three-quarter. The girls were recruited to hold pins and fetch thread, and they took their duties with the seriousness of soldiers on a critical mission. Around midday, Cole ventured back to the house, took one look at the chaos, and immediately retreated. But not before June caught him. "Daddy, you can't see the dress. It's bad luck." "I'm not looking at any dress," he protested. "I'm just hungry." "There's cold chicken and biscuits in the pantry," Maeve called. "Take them outside, far outside." She heard his laugh echo from the kitchen, and despite the pins digging into her waist and the overwhelming attention, she found herself smiling. This was real. This was happening. In less than 3 weeks, she'd stand before the whole town and marry this man, and these little girls would truly be hers. By evening, the women had finally packed up and departed, leaving behind a partially constructed dress that was, Maeve had to admit, beautiful. The cream silk caught the lamplight and seemed to glow. The lace at the collar was delicate without being fussy. It was exactly the kind of dress she'd never imagined wearing. "You're going to be the prettiest bride ever," June said solemnly, touching the fabric with reverent fingers. "Not prettier than Mama was," Ivy corrected, "but pretty in a different way." Maeve knelt down, ignoring the protest from her still healing ribs. "You know what? I think your first Mama and I can both be pretty in our own ways. There's enough pretty to go around." "Do you think she'd like you?" June asked, the question she'd asked before, but with new weight now. "I hope so," Maeve said honestly. "I hope she'd be happy that you two have someone to take care of you, and that your daddy has help, and that this family is—" She searched for the right word. "Whole again." "We think she sent you," Ivy said with absolute certainty. "We prayed for a mama, and then you were there on the platform, and we just knew." Cole appeared in the doorway, his expression soft. "Time for bed, girls. Mrs. Harper needs rest, and tomorrow's a work day." They went reluctantly, extracting promises of bedtime stories and pancakes for breakfast. When they were finally settled, Cole found Maeve on the porch, staring out at the darkening prairie. "Survive the invasion?" he asked, settling beside her. "Barely. They're determined to make this wedding a proper affair." "Is that what you want?" Maeve thought about it. "I don't know. My first wedding was all show, expensive and elaborate and meaningless. This feels different. These women genuinely want to help, to celebrate. It's strange, but in a good way." "They've accepted you," Cole said. "Took them long enough, but they see what I saw from the start, that you're worth 10 of anyone else." "Cole Harding, are you getting sentimental on me?" "Maybe." He took her hand, thumb tracing the ring on her finger. "Can I tell you something? Promise you won't think I'm crazy. After everything we've been through, I think that ship has sailed." He smiled. Fair point. The thing is, I've been thinking about what the girls said, about Sarah sending you. And I know it sounds foolish, but sometimes I think they might be right. Not in a mystical way, necessarily, but he struggled for words. The timing of it all. You being on that train, being the last one left on that platform, the girls seeing you at exactly that moment. It feels like it was meant to be, Maeve finished softly. Yeah. He looked at her, his eyes serious in the dim light. I didn't expect this, Maeve. Didn't expect to feel... He stopped, started again. When I asked you to stay, to marry me, it was practical, a solution to a problem. But somewhere along the way, it stopped being practical and started being real, Maeve whispered. Real, he agreed, and a little terrifying, if I'm being honest. Maeve understood. She'd felt it too, the shift from arrangement to something deeper, the way her heart lifted when she heard his step on the porch, the way she found herself watching him work, admiring the capable strength in his movements, the way his rare smiles made her feel like she'd won some kind of prize. I'm scared too, she admitted. What if I'm not enough? What if 3 months from now, or a year from now, you realize you made a mistake? Cole turned to face her fully, his hands coming up to cup her face. Listen to me. You are enough, more than enough. You're brave and strong and kind, and you love my daughters like they're your own. That's not something I take lightly. That's not something I'm going to just change my mind about. But what about... Maeve gestured vaguely at herself. Everything people said I was? Too wide, too awkward, too... Stop. Cole's voice was firm. I don't care what people said. I care about who you are. And who you are is the woman who threw herself in front of a stampede to save my children. The woman who brought life back to this house. The woman who argues with me about mending fences and makes perfect biscuits and tells stories that make the girls laugh. That's who I'm marrying. Not some idea of what a wife should be, but you. Exactly as you are. Tears spilled down Maeve's cheeks. I think I'm falling in love with you, she said, the words escaping before she could stop them. Is that allowed? In a practical arrangement? Cole's answering smile was like sunrise. I think I'm falling in love with you too. So if it's not allowed, we're both in trouble. He kissed her then, and it was different from the gentle kiss in the garden. This was deeper, more urgent, full of promise and possibility. Maeve melted into it, her hands coming up to grip his shirt, anchoring herself to this moment, this man, this unexpected future. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Cole rested his forehead against hers. 3 weeks is too long, he said roughly. The mourning period. I know, and we'll respect it. But the day it's done, Maeve Harper, you're becoming Maeve Harding, and then I'm never letting you go. The next 2.5 weeks were a study in controlled chaos. The dress was completed, with Maeve standing for what felt like hours while women made final adjustments. The menu for the wedding breakfast was debated with the intensity of a military campaign. Should they serve ham or chicken, biscuits or rolls, apple pie or berry? In the end, they settled on all of it, with half the women in town volunteering to cook. The girls were fitted for new dresses, matching blue calico that made them look like small angels, assuming angels could argue about who got to wear the slightly darker ribbon. Cole was bullied into town to be measured for a new suit, and returned looking distinctly uncomfortable but undeniably handsome when Maeve saw him try it on. Through it all, life on the ranch continued. Cattle needed tending, chickens needed feeding, and Bessie the cow maintained her reputation for being temperamental. Maeve's ribs finally healed completely, and she threw herself back into work with renewed energy, driven by nervous excitement and the need to keep busy. But underneath the activity, there was a growing tension. The closer they got to the wedding day, the more Maeve found herself watching Cole, noticing small things. The way he laughed at the girls' jokes, the way his hands moved with such competence and care, the way he'd started touching her more often, a hand on her back as he passed, fingers lingering when he handed her something, his leg pressing against hers under the dinner table. They were careful, maintaining propriety, but the awareness between them crackled like summer lightning. 2 days before the wedding, disaster struck. Maeve was in the barn, feeding the horses, when she heard raised voices from the house. She hurried back to find a strange man on the porch, well-dressed, an official looking, with papers in his hand and an expression of bureaucratic disdain. Cole stood between the man and the door, his posture rigid with tension. "I don't care what your papers say," he was saying, voice tight with barely controlled anger. "Those girls are my daughters, and they're staying with me. Mr. Harding, I'm simply doing my job." The man's voice was oily with false sympathy. "Your wife's sister has petitioned for custody, citing concerns about the girls' welfare. She claims you're unable to provide proper care and supervision, especially given the—" He glanced at Maeve, "irregular domestic situation." Maeve felt ice flood her veins. Sarah's sister. She'd heard Cole mention her once, a woman back east who'd had minimal contact with the family, but had apparently decided now was the time to assert her rights. "The situation isn't irregular," Cole said through gritted teeth. "Mrs. Harper is my fiancée. We're getting married in 2 days." "So I've heard, very convenient timing." The man made a note on his papers. "Regardless, I'm required to conduct an inspection and interview the children. I'll be back tomorrow morning to do so. And Mr. Harding, I'd strongly suggest you have your house and your affairs in order. The state takes the welfare of minor children very seriously." He left, and Cole stood frozen on the porch, his hands clenched into fists. "Cole?" Maeve approached carefully. "What can we do?" "I don't know." His voice was hollow. Caroline, Sarah's sister. She never cared about the girls before. Never visited, barely wrote. But I suppose with Sarah gone and me preparing to remarry, she sees an opportunity. If she can prove I'm unfit, she could take them, move them back east, raise them as her own. "She can't do that. You're their father." "I'm their father who let them run out in a storm and nearly get killed." Cole's voice was bitter. "I'm their father who's been so overwhelmed trying to run this ranch that the house fell apart. I'm their father who's marrying a woman he barely knows. When you lay it out like that, it doesn't look good." "Then we make it look good." Maeve's voice was firm. "We show them a clean house, happy children, a functioning household. We show them what we've built here." Cole looked at her with something like desperation. "What if it's not enough?" "Then we fight harder." Maeve took his hands. "Cole, I'm not letting some woman who couldn't be bothered to visit her nieces take them away. We're a family. We're going to stay a family." That night, after the girls were in bed, blissfully unaware of the threat hanging over them, Maeve and Cole sat at the kitchen table making plans. They'd clean every inch of the house. They'd prepare the girls for questions. They'd present a united front. They'd do whatever it took. "I'm sorry," Cole said at one point, his voice rough. "Sorry you're being dragged into this. You didn't sign up for custody battles and inspections." "Actually, I did." Maeve reached across the table and took his hand. "When I said I'd marry you, when I said those girls were mine, this is exactly what I signed up for. All of it. The good, the bad, and the bureaucratic nightmares. We're in this together." The next morning, they were ready. The house gleamed. Fresh bread cooled on the counter. The girls were dressed in their best dresses, hair neatly braided. Cole wore his Sunday clothes, and Maeve had chosen her most respectable dress, her hair pinned up in a style that she hoped projected maternal competence. The inspector arrived at 9 o'clock sharp, bringing with him an air of skeptical authority and a notebook that he consulted constantly. He toured the house, making notes. He examined the sleeping arrangements, the food stores, the general state of repair. He watched Maeve and Cole interact with the girls, observed breakfast being served, asked pointed questions about schooling and discipline and household management. Through it all, Ivy and June were perfect angels. They answered questions politely. They demonstrated their reading skills. They showed off the garden Maeve had restored and explained, with touching earnestness, how Maeve had saved them from the stampede. "Mrs. Harper is going to be our new mama," June said with absolute conviction. "We prayed for her, and God sent her to us." "Our first mama would like her," Ivy added. "We're sure of it." The inspector made more notes, his expression unreadable. Finally, he asked to speak with Cole and Maeve privately. They sent the girls outside to play and sat across from him at the kitchen table, hearts pounding. "Mr. Harding, Mrs. Harper," he began, "I've seen many households in my time as a child welfare inspector. Some good, some adequate, some deeply concerning." He paused, and Maeve felt her stomach drop. "This household is exceptional." Cole blinked. "Excuse me?" "Those children are happy, healthy, well cared for, and clearly adored. This house is clean and well maintained. Mrs. Harper, your presence here has obviously had a positive impact. The children speak of you with genuine affection, and their father looks at you with respect and, if I may be frank, love. He closed his notebook. I will be filing a report recommending that the petition for custody be denied. In my professional opinion, removing those children from this home would be detrimental to their welfare. Maeve felt tears spring to her eyes. Cole's hand found hers under the table and squeezed hard enough to hurt. However, the inspector continued, I will note in my report that this recommendation is contingent on the marriage proceeding as planned. Should you fail to marry, or should the domestic situation change significantly, the petition may be revisited. Am I clear? Crystal clear, Cole said, his voice shaking with relief. Thank you so much. After the inspector left, Cole pulled Maeve into his arms and just held her, his face buried in her hair. She could feel him trembling. We did it, she whispered. They're safe. They're ours. Because of you, Cole said roughly. If you hadn't been here, if you hadn't turned this house into a home, we did it together, Maeve corrected. That's what family does. The day of the wedding dawned clear and beautiful, the kind of perfect prairie morning that felt like a gift. Maeve woke early, nerves and excitement warring in her stomach. This was it. Today she would stop being Maeve Harper, cursed widow, disappointment daughter, woman too wide to wed. Today she would become Maeve Harding, wife, mother, partner. The women arrived early to help her dress. The silk gown slid over her body like water, the fit perfect after all their careful work. Martha's mother's veil, delicate lace yellowed with age, was pinned into her hair. Someone had found wildflowers, and they wove them into a crown that felt both rustic and regal. When Maeve finally looked at herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked happy. She looked beautiful. She looked like a bride. Oh, honey, Mrs. Killian said, and her eyes were actually damp. You're lovely. The girls burst in, ignoring all protocols, and stopped dead at the sight of her. Mama, June breathed, you look like a princess. A real princess, Ivy added, not a boring one. Maeve laughed through her tears and pulled them both close, careful not to crush her dress. You two look pretty magnificent yourselves. The church was packed when they arrived. It seemed like everyone within 20 miles had come, dressed in their Sunday best, filling the pews and spilling out onto the lawn. Maeve's hand shook as she stood in the vestibule, waiting for her cue. You ready? Mrs. Killian asked, her appointed role as stand-in mother apparent in the way she fussed with Maeve's veil. I'm terrified, Maeve admitted. Good. That means it matters. The older woman smiled. Now go get your family. The doors opened and Maeve walked down the aisle alone. No father to give her away, no one to pass her from one man to another like property. She walked on her own 2 feet, head high, toward the man waiting for her at the altar. Cole stood there in his new suit, and when he saw her, his face transformed. The careful control he usually maintained cracked completely, and Maeve saw everything she needed to see in his eyes. Love, joy, wonder, welcome. The girls flanked him, bouncing with barely contained excitement. When Maeve reached the front, they immediately grabbed her hands, one on each side, as if to make sure she couldn't escape. The Reverend, the same one who'd questioned them weeks ago, smiled with what appeared to be genuine warmth. Dearly beloved, he began, and Maeve stopped hearing the words. She was too focused on Cole's face, on the way he was looking at her like she was something precious, on the way the girls were squeezing her hands, on the feeling of rightness that washed over her, so strong it made her dizzy. Do you, Cole Harding, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do. Cole's voice was clear and sure. Do you, Maeve Harper, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? I do. The words came out stronger than she'd expected. Then by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Cole, you may kiss your bride. Cole stepped forward, his hands coming up to frame her face with a gentleness that made her heart ache. And then he kissed her, and the church erupted in applause, and Ivy and June were cheering, and Maeve felt like her heart might actually burst from happiness. They broke apart, both grinning like fools, and turned to face the congregation as husband and wife. The girls immediately attached themselves to Maeve's skirt, and they walked back down the aisle together, all four of them, while people cheered and threw rice and generally made a joyful commotion. Outside, in the bright sunshine, Cole pulled her aside for just a moment. "Hello, Mrs. Harding," he said, and the way he said her new name made her shiver. "Hello, Mr. Harding." "I love you," he said, simple and direct. "Should have said it before, but I'm saying it now. I love you, Maeve." "I love you too," she whispered back. "So much it scares me." "Good." He kissed her again, quick and hard. "Now, let's go celebrate. I believe there's enough food to feed an army." The wedding breakfast was indeed a feast. Tables had been set up outside the church, groaning under the weight of ham, chicken, biscuits, rolls, pies of every description, cakes, and enough coffee to keep the whole county awake for a week. People ate and laughed and shared stories. The girls ran wild with the other children, their shrieks of joy echoing across the prairie. Maeve found herself surrounded by women who wanted to congratulate her, to tell her they were glad she'd come to Red Bluff Station, to welcome her officially into the community. Some of them had been at the station that first day, had been among the ones who'd called her too wide to wed. Now they acted like they'd been her champions all along. Maeve found she didn't care about the hypocrisy. People changed their minds. That was allowed. As the afternoon wore on, Cole found her and pulled her away from the crowd. "Come with me," he said. "Just for a minute." He led her away from the church, out toward where the prairie stretched endlessly. They walked in comfortable silence until the noise of the celebration faded to a distant murmur. "I wanted to give you this," Cole said, pulling something from his pocket. Didn't seem right to do it in front of everyone. It was a letter, creased and worn. Maeve took it carefully. "What is this?" "Read it." She unfolded the pages and recognized the handwriting immediately. Feminine, elegant, Sarah's handwriting. "Cole, I can't read your wife's private. She wrote it for you," he said quietly. "Well, not for you specifically, but for whoever came after her. Read it." With shaking hands, Maeve read. "To the woman who will love my family after I'm gone, if you're reading this, it means Cole found someone. It means my girls have a new mother. It means my stubborn, wonderful husband finally let someone help him. I need you to know something. I'm grateful. I'm grateful that you're there, that you're taking care of the people I love most in the world. I'm grateful that Ivy and June will have a mother's love, even if it's not mine. I'm grateful that Cole won't be alone. Please be patient with him. He's terrible at asking for help and even worse at accepting it. He'll work himself to death if you let him, out of some misplaced sense that he has to do everything himself. Don't let him. Make him rest. Make him laugh. Make him remember that life is more than just surviving. Please love my daughters. They're wild and stubborn and absolutely perfect. They need someone who will braid their hair and tell them stories and show them that women can be strong. They need someone who will teach them that love doesn't end. It just grows to include more people. And please, please don't think you're replacing me. You're not. You're something new, something they need in a different way. There's room in their hearts for both of us. There's room for all the love. Thank you for saying yes. Thank you for staying. Thank you for being brave enough to love a family that comes with ghosts and grief and all the complicated messiness of real life. You are a gift. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." With gratitude and hope, Sarah Maeve finished reading through a blur of tears. She folded the letter carefully and looked up at Cole. "She wrote this?" "About 6 months before she died. She knew she was getting weaker, knew she might not have much time. She made me promise to give it to whoever I married, if I ever did." He touched her face gently. "She'd love you, Maeve. She'd love how brave you are, how strong. She'd love that you saved our daughters and brought joy back to our home." "I wish I could have known her," Maeve said softly. "Me too." Cole pulled her close. "But you know what? I think in a way you do. You know her through the girls, through the house she made, through the love she left behind. And now you're adding your own love to it. And it's—" He searched for words. "It's beautiful, all of it, the past and the present and the future all woven together." They stood there in the vast openness of the prairie, holding each other, while the celebration continued in the distance. Maeve thought about the journey that had brought her here, the pain, the rejection, the desperate train ride west. She thought about standing on that platform, feeling like the world's biggest failure, hearing the jeers and mockery. And then she thought about two little girls in blue dresses, about small hands grabbing hers with absolute certainty, about a quiet man who'd given her a chance when no one else would. "We should get back," she said finally. "The girls will be looking for us." "In a minute." Cole kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "I just want to stand here with my wife for a little longer. Is that allowed?" "Always," Maeve promised. When they finally returned to the celebration, hand in hand, they found Ivy and June had organized the other children into some kind of elaborate game that seemed to involve a lot of running and shrieking. The girls spotted them and came racing over, breathless and laughing. "Mama, Mama, we told everyone about how you saved us from the stampede," Ivy said. "And about how you make the best biscuits," June added. "And about how you're the bravest person we know." They finished together. Maeve knelt down and pulled them both into a hug. "You two are my favorite people in the entire world. Do you know that?" "Even better than Daddy?" Ivy asked with a mischievous grin. "Different than Daddy," Maeve corrected. "There's different kinds of love for different people. But you two? You're my whole heart." Cole crouched down beside them, completing the circle. "What do you say we head home? I think we've celebrated enough for one day." The ride home was peaceful, the girls drowsy in the back of the wagon, the setting sun painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Maeve leaned against her husband's shoulder. Husband, what a strange and wonderful word, and felt complete peace settle over her. This was her life now, this ranch, this family, this endless sky. She was Maeve Harding, and she was exactly where she was supposed to be. At the house, Cole carried the sleeping girls to bed while Maeve changed out of her wedding dress and into something more practical. She found him on the porch afterward, staring out at the darkening prairie. "Tired?" she asked, settling beside him. "Exhausted. Happy." He pulled her close. "Grateful." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds. Then Cole said, "I never thought I'd have this again. A partner. Someone to share the work and the worry and the joy. Thank you for taking a chance on us." "Thank you for seeing me," Maeve said simply. "For looking at the woman everyone else had written off and seeing someone worth keeping." "Always," Cole promised. "You're worth everything, Maeve Harding, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you know it." Inside, the girls slept peacefully, safe and loved. Outside, the prairie stretched endlessly under a sky full of stars. And on the porch of a small ranch house in Wyoming Territory, two people who'd both been broken by loss found themselves whole again in each other. The woman who'd been too wide to wed had found her home, and it was perfect.